Well, good afternoon and welcome. I want to first thank Jackie and Michelle and John and others who put time in from the ASLA effort to have this event occur here, and as well acknowledge the sponsors who support these occasions. I feel very honored to be here to share ideas and information that I think has relevance to our industry and profession, and in that way this gives me a chance to show and tell things that I've been involved in for a number of years now. And in our conversations and program planning, we were trying to look at some of the specific benefits of our urban landscapes, trees in particular, as a way of reinforcing things that we're trying to do and perhaps identifying things that we need to manage more carefully. So what I'm going to be presenting to you are a series of images and observations that reduce down to what I call a carbon footprint assessment of our urban landscapes. And in that regard, have some metrics to share with you and hope it's informative on a technical level on one hand, to just conceptually suggesting actions and directions we might pursue on another hand, and all along the way encourage us all to become more informed and knowledgeable about a lot of different things. So in this regard, the emphasis is the environmental benefits of plants, and we'll define that in a moment. So we often look at this new definition of sustainability, or challenge of sustainability being defined as a social, economic, environmental, cultural phenomena, and a balancing of all of these considerations. And this is focused on the environmental component of that conversation, and one that I feel is, hugely important, based on the assumption that if you can't sustain your environment, which indeed is what's the basis of our existence here, some of these other challenges are secondary to just resolving the sustainability issue in the environmental sense. So with that, we'll start with this image here and say that I'm going to divide the benefits of our urban landscapes and urban forests into two categories, primary and secondary, and want to point out that from the environmental perspective, the fundamental life-sustaining role of plants on this planet is an energy conversion process through photosynthesis that reduces down to the sequestering of carbon, the embodiment of energy, and the release of oxygen into the atmosphere. And this is what makes the world turn round and life on this planet survive. And so these are the primary areas of measurement and evaluation that plants can provide to us in our urban landscapes. Many secondary benefits exist too, and in this regard, they're very significant and important, and depending upon project situations, the priorities change, but we can certainly attest to the performance of our urban landscapes in terms of climate mitigation, pollution mitigation, and extending into some more challenging areas of understanding that plants affect our emotional and mental health. And there's no doubt that we can't imagine an urban environment without plants. It helps complete the urban fabric in critical ways. But in that regard, I would remind us that urban landscapes are a cultural invention. So they are evolved through the thoughts and ideas and actions of people more than some of the natural processes that affect the evolution, adaptation, and functioning of plants in natural systems. So we're talking about people making decisions here and understanding what we're trying to accomplish, and we pursue those choices based on certain priorities. Did I hit the black one? Okay. Now let me go back one. Okay, so thank you. There are too many buttons here. It's like my remote at home. So In this regard, what's interesting, and I'm talking on a global scale now and a universal scale, and I brought a couple of props here. So very simple props, but I think they do demonstrate pretty clearly what this chart attempts to summarize with some numbers. But I brought along a wonderful piece of oak wood that's been carved into a bookend. So this is one of two bookends that I have in my library, and it weighs approximately 1 pound. And the universal point to make here is for every pound of dry weight biomass that plants produce on this planet, they accomplish the same environmental benefits. One of those is half of this by weight is sequestered carbon. The other half is oxygen. And I'm always mystified and marveled by saying I'm holding up pure carbon, oxygen, and a little bit of hydrogen thrown in for a good mixture. And to me, it looks like wood, not those three basic elements on this planet. And to drive home the point about the carbon sequestration, I brought along some of Kingsford's finest briquettes, half-pound worth of carbon right here, illustrating, to, I think, what we commonly associate carbon to be, a dark, heavy, dense compound. And indeed, sequestered like this and cleaned and formed, we do have a half a pound of pure carbon in these briquettes that I'm holding up. So whether you're an oak tree, coast redwood tree, a wonderful heritage rose plant, for every pound of plant tissue that is produced by plants in our environment, we have this universal half-pound carbon ratio relationship that's been sequestered from the atmosphere. Another universal benefit of plants, every pound of biomass that's produced releases in the process of photosynthesis 1 pound of oxygen to enrich the atmosphere. So it's reducing what we would call the greenhouse gas load of carbon dioxide, storing the carbon, releasing the oxygen. Perhaps more interesting to me and part of the carbon footprint modeling is to say there's embodied energy here. It was once sunlight, it was once water, it's once carbon dioxide, and now it's plant tissue, and it has potential energy in here through the bonds of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. 1 pound of dry weight biomass contains enough food energy for one person for 1 day. It contains enough energy to produce 2.25 kilowatt hours of electricity, or 1,655 BTUs of heat energy. It just means that we can describe the energy value of 1 pound of biomass produced by any type of plant anywhere on this planet to that universal potential. And if I was able to eat this, I would get my 1 day of energy. And in order to really get the benefit of the food energy that's in here, I need to inhale that 1 pound of oxygen, go through respiration, use that 1 pound of oxygen, consume the energy value in this, and release that half pound of carbon back into the atmosphere through respiration and breathing. And so it's a wonderful little cycle, and it's a very universal core, I feel, of understanding environmental benefits of plants. So in this regard here, we have just a picture of downtown Los Angeles, and here we have plants that are planted for a variety of reasons, but just understand whether you ask plants to do it or not, they're producing these benefits, they're performing these functions, and contribute these basic life-sustaining benefits to life on this planet. So I want to now segue back to the secondary benefits, knowing that we use plants for a lot of purposes, and we use them for very functional and environmental reasons, such as climate mitigation, to reduce heat load on buildings during summer months and potentially allow sunlight access during the winter. That reduces the cooling cost that is sustained by use of electricity that's often produced by the burning of fossil fuels to produce the electricity to run the air conditioner. Two, we have a variety of benefits to help filter out pollution that we generate in our urban environments, both in the air and in water, as well as stabilize our soils and reduce erosion, factors like that. And we go into the realm of the emotional, psychological impact of plants, and happily there's some wonderful literature that really delves into this challenging area to describe different ways that we respond to plants and the benefits they afford us in our lives. And so we have that checklist that can be illustrated with images like this. Not only does climate mitigation provide functional relief to our climate conditions, but there's aesthetics and beauty along with it, as you can see with these Colereteria trees adjacent to these single-story homes in the city of La Verne. Clearly, we impact the shape of our topography, introduce homes and buildings in many places, and we have a long list of functional roles of plants to stabilize and control and to eventually heal over some of those initial grading actions. There's no doubt about many of our cities are wonderfully dynamic and filled with a lot of energy and noise and other factors that the landscape, particularly parks, provide relief to and a sanctuary to just find your own place and space and to enjoy your daily activities. In this case here, looking at this park example that was designed by Mia Lair and Associates, Vista Hermosa, first park in the city of Los Angeles in 100 years, and a very skillful combination of accommodating recreation, habitat, and applying many of the concepts to reduce the consumption of water, pursue species diversity, and have a profile of a new framework for the design of urban parks. So I'm going to stop going down the secondary benefit line of discussion and come back to the primary and say we can now do some pretty sensible projections and assessments of our landscape decisions and choices. And so I'm going to look at two different types of landscape, describe their benefits to us, and then look at the costs associated with producing and maintaining them. So in this regard here, I'm just going to focus on turf grass and say that our tall fescue, cool season grass, it's pretty tough and well adapted to many areas of California. We can pretty accurately describe that there's about a ½ pound of plant tissue or dry weight biomass per square foot. The foliage that's not trimmed, the stems, and the roots. And there's a certain amount of that organic material that is deposited in the soil, so it has additional benefit in terms of carbon sequestration. You take that ½ pound per square foot, and you discover then that 21,780 pounds of carbon are held in that 1 acre of turf grass. And equally here, it weighs 21,780 pounds. 10,890 pounds is carbon. There's been 21,000 pounds of oxygen released. And if we're to convert that turf grass into kilowatt energy units, it would be equal to 9,680 kilowatt hours of energy. So this is the primary benefit profile. And you do a landscape project, you say, well, how many square feet of turf grass do I have? Multiply it by these universal values, and you can come up with the environmental contributions from turf grass to the environment. Similarly, we take our trees and shrubs, and we can do projected estimates as to their environmental benefits. this allows me to point to the little icon up in the upper right-hand corner, and the iTrees carbon footprint calculator tool that has recently come into our profession, and say a wonderful step forward. And so I've taken values using that calculator to say, well, how much carbon's in a 10-inch diameter breast height coast live oak tree? And we do know that some trees have greater density of wood or other characteristics that can affect the calculation, which has been factored in. But for this particular tree, 10-inch caliper diameter breast height, iTree says, hey, 980 to 1,000 pounds of dry weight biomass, canopy, stems, and roots. And so we have now the beginnings of an industry standard and framework to apply to some of our projects. And in that, we can take that weight and convert it into the stored carbon, the potential energy value it represents, and the oxygen benefit to the landscape. And that's just for that one tree. We now take this tree 50, 60 years later when it's mature and it's in an urban context, and we say it's now gone from 10 inches to 48 inches. It now weighs 34,000 pounds, and we can see the lifetime or the life cycle benefit of this plant going from rather youthful to more mature. And it's really very impressive. So with that, we'll take a landscape that's in the Arroyo Seco area around the Rose Bowl in Pasadena. There are golf courses and turf and tree park landscapes, such as this image is illustrating here. And we want to know if indeed these benefits really add up and we're gaining all of this from our landscape plants. And this is where we say we have to start looking at the investment in materials and resources and actions to achieve these landscapes, from grading the ground, trenching for pipes, manufacturing the piping and putting it in, to the pumping of water, to the mowing, the trimming, the fertilizing, and see what's really going on here. And in this particular case, what we've done here is we said, let's bring to Southern California from the State Water Project 1 acre foot of water, 12 inches. And we'll also get it from reclaimed sources from our local wastewater treatment plants. Sometimes the water goes from here to here, and the cost is more than what you might first think. Groundwater is by far the cheapest, just pumping it from a local source. And desalinization is the worst. It has more energy associated with cleaning the water and removing the salts. So we bring our 1 acre foot of water from Northern California, and we need to take 1.3 of these trees and combust it and generate the energy to pump that water to Southern California. Reclaimed water, happily, we only use, when we pump water out of the ground, about 1/2 the tree. So we can cut this tree off about here and save the rest, and the top, though, has to be used for the energy that we're using. That's reclaimed on groundwater. 1 acre feet, we can actually pump out 4 acre feet of water before we have to cut this tree down and convert it into its energy for obtaining that water. And if we're using desalinized water, we need 2 trees per acre foot. So now I've just switched into energy as a way of trying to demonstrate the relationship, but it's the same thing with carbon. We're just talking about 1 acre foot of water from Northern California. The energy that's consumed releases 670 pounds of carbon into the atmosphere on average. And so this is the carbon footprint methodology here. You go to UC Davis, you go to their Sustainable Sites website, you read about best care practices for turf grass, and they come up with, at a minimum, you should be applying 1 pound of pure nitrogen on each application to your 1 acre of turf grass 4 times a year. and that's to keep it healthy, keep it functional, and these things. And when you convert the energy, the embodied energy, and the carbon footprint of 1 pound of nitrogen times how many pounds you would apply per acre, 195, that's equal to 390 pounds of biomass, or approximately 8/10 of one of those oak trees there. So just trying to have a metric here to see, well, what are we really achieving and what's the cost along the way to produce that. PVC pipe and high-density polyethylene pipe is also very revealing. 1 acre PVC pipe, the embodied energy and associated carbon footprint is equal to over 7 of these trees. And to a lot of us, may not realize that high-density polyethylene is more energy intensive, has a bigger carbon footprint than PVC pipe. And so it's equal to at least 8 trees and the embodied energy and sequestered carbon that those 10-inch diameter breast height oak trees sequester. So the picture I'm painting here is one that begins to show us that things that seem to be relatively affordable or convenient or common in our industry need to be reassessed from another perspective as part of our efforts to achieve the best benefits from our urban landscapes. So take it one more step and talk about fossil fuel use, diesel and gasoline, and have a way of translating that into a carbon footprint comparison as well. Now, the point I will be making here is I'm looking at water, I'm looking at fertilizer, I'm looking at the piping, and I'm looking at the gasoline use. I'm not looking at manufacturing brick, concrete, steel, lights. We're just looking at sort of what sustains plants and looking at plants to inputs for plants. And as soon as you expand the conversation into those other landscape materials, you will find that we're not anywhere close to a sustainable picture in that regard. And even in this regard, we're challenged, as these examples will show you. But a quick departure of this to show you a project we've worked on in Moreno Valley. Very modest. It's not going to win any awards, but I hope it's on the front end of something we do increasingly in our profession. We took this 1 acre, we ran it through the state water efficient landscape ordinance. We actually incorporated the very recently adopted 0.45 adjustment factor down from 0.7. And in this approach, the state would approve a design that required or did not exceed 770,000 gallons of water per year. And in Moreno Valley, we bring that water from the state water project. We apply 2.4 acre feet a year of water, so we're applying about 30 inches of water to this median per year. And we're going to grow a landscape that we have used the iTrees to calculate its lifetime benefits. We also put in some amendments. We also grow our plants in nurseries and truck them out, and we dig our holes. This project we did by augering holes, pre-hydrating, filling the holes up 2 or 3 times, and we said no irrigation system. It's going to have to survive on rainfall alone within the watershed, if you will, of a 16-foot wide median. And there's no additional surface area to subsidize the irrigation or moisture into this median. And we've planted our plants, and the project's in its 2nd year. We've had a 95% success ratio, which we're very, very happy with. We also know that part of what's buying us time is by augering a good-sized hole, filling it up with water and hydrating the soil and calculating how much water is available to plants. These are small plants, and there's relatively good soil moisture availability for many months. And it's the small plants, the small leaf surface area that is in proportion to the available moisture. And we know that when we planted in May, there was enough ground moisture available for these plants to carry them all the way through a very hot summer. This environment has 63 inches of evapotranspiration stress based on the weather stations. And so it does take off very well, but beware, as these plants get larger, their leaf surface area multiplies exponentially. Their capacity to use water increases remarkably. 97–98% of water use by plant is transpired for cooling of leaves and lost to the atmosphere. And so that's a pretty universal constant. And so at the moment, we have this wonderful large soil area relative to small leaf surface area. And when we get our rains, 4 to 5 inches a year, we get some additional moisture and the plants are happy. The question is, what happens after 15 years, or will the water create a ceiling, which it will, on the ultimate size of these plants? In any event, we did our little calculation. We said, we're going to grow a forest that has this much carbon sequestration potential. If we had used state water to achieve that, and we look at the carbon footprint of pumping that water down, in 9.25 years, the water that we would pump down from Northern California, its carbon footprint would exceed the lifetime benefit of our landscape. And it raises a question. Are we looking for parity? Are we looking for 10 years of positive benefit here, 30 years, 40 years? This line of assessment of landscapes starts to add to our toolkit of ideas and strategies to think about what we're doing and make choices here. We're very glad we didn't put in the drip irrigation, 18 inches on center, 8 lines in this 16-foot wide median, because we would have released per acre, in this case, 2,000 pounds of carbon. So it would have offset the benefit of many of our trees just in using that material alone. And to take that idea once more and just try to impress you with things that we need to study more carefully and to account for and introduce into these equations and assessments, working on a project in Moore Park where decades ago they planted coast redwood trees by the hundreds, creating a wonderful urban boulevard that is just the heart and soul of that city. And voila, 4 years of drought, reducing irrigation, and simply overplanting and using a species that's not adapted to the climate of this region, we have a whole forest of trees in full decline. And it's as much from good intention to plant lots of trees to create a lot of carbon sequestration and just not understand that we run to a climax in our urban landscapes, and we now are faced with not only the economic costs but the very likely reality that these trees will be removed and hopefully used and recycled in some meaningful way, but we've lost their benefit after this stage of their development here. The energy we use on the equipment that's dedicated for landscapes is huge, to just an example of the grading and shaping of the land, which is so important, particularly for rainwater harvesting and impoundment of moisture that we get through rain. But we use huge amounts of fossil fuel to operate the equipment to achieve, in this case, a channel that's going to be replanted and used for restoration purposes. And we're working on this project, and we know already that the energy we use to prep the site is going to exceed the lifetime benefit of the natural habitat we're going to install there, even though it has the secondary benefits of wildlife habitat, of open space, of filtering air pollution and things like this. The carbon footprint equation says you lost the battle already. You've spent so much carbon just to prep the site to get it ready for planting that you'll never catch up with your investment. And want to continue just to convey that what seems to be standard practice and something that we pencil out in economic terms as a challenge to care for all of our urban landscapes, the relentless armada of cars and trucks that go on the road every day to visit landscapes of all different sizes, different times of the year, different periods over the years to perform different maintenance actions adds significantly to the carbon footprint that is charged against the benefits of our urban plants. And in this particular case, on another project we're involved in, damage was done to a mature eucalyptus tree, and the decision was made that it goes out. I'm impressed that you can take a 50-foot tree like this and in less than 15 minutes time cut it apart, lie it on the ground, and put it in chippers and shredders that can take 12 and 14-inch diameter stems and just chip it down in a heartbeat. You know, that part's miraculous. The other part is this can become potentially recycled into compost and be distributed and used as a mulching material on top of our landscape. And so we do get some additional benefit. There's still carbon embodied in that tissue that's in that compost. Beware, as it does digest and get composted down to its mineralized form, the carbon is returned back to the atmosphere as carbon dioxide. So the cycle is delayed, but the inevitable ending is the same, that this tree no longer provides the shade, the habitat value, its sequestered carbon is now lost in terms of its benefit. So in summary, and I haven't seen anybody wave the hands that I've gone beyond 30 minutes, but I probably have in my excitement over this. Want to say I do see we're in an industry and a profession to really achieve cultural landscapes that have as many benefits as possible. Bottom line, in the environmental point of view, is to say, do not consume more energy, more carbon, more oxygen than the landscape produces or embodies. And we now have tools to project what our landscapes produce and embody. And so we can begin to factor that into our design and planning process. And we know right away, stay away from desalinated water, stay away from the State Water Project, grade your projects really well and capture that rain and infiltrate it, work with appropriate plants. And I'm getting ahead of myself to where I have a checklist of advice that I feel these observations lead to. We do want an abundant and diverse landscape, and I know Robin's going to really add to that diversity discussion in a few minutes, and yet say it doesn't mean that we have to skimp and run from the challenge. These are tools and ideas to help us meet that challenge and pursue it with higher levels of success and effectiveness for all of us. Fit the region, fit the microclimates. Microclimates let so many species of plants grow in Southern California, and I celebrate that. And if you do fit plants correctly to both the region and the microclimate, you have wonderful ways of enabling them to perform to remarkable capabilities. Right plant, right place is not overcrowding, not oversize. Do this carbon footprint tool approach, manage your water use, plant for climate mitigation, pollution, and these many other benefits here. And ultimately, let's invite the public and all of us to urban landscapes that are indeed filled with bountiful opportunity to find recreation, find habitat, find personal stress relief, and find the joys and excitement of living in a culture that really enjoys landscaping. Thank you very much.